In the quiet woods of Vermont, a family moved into a cheap wooden house, believing it would mend the fractures left by years of exhaustion. The scent of old ash clung to every grain of timber, and the slanted walls seemed to be listening. At night, the house groaned as though something shifted within its very bones. Footsteps echoed from a hallway that did not exist. Beyond the window, a flickering light revealed the silhouette of another house, one that had burned to the ground decades ago. Yet it seemed still alive, still waiting for them to step inside. The narrow dirt road leading to the old wooden house seemed swallowed in mist. Tires crunched over layers of rotting leaves, leaving behind damp, faded tracks. The house appeared, small, yet heavy, sagging as though burdened by winters that had never truly ended. Its dark roof was mottled, its wooden walls bleached gray by wind, its windows jutting out like hollow, sunken eyes. Outside, the silence was so complete that the only sound was the wind threading through the trees, carrying with it the chill of decayed earth. The husband lingered on the porch, sensing a stifling presence in the air, as though the house were not empty at all, but waiting. The wife trailed behind, her eyes sweeping over every detail, half eager, half wary. Their daughter hurried ahead, feigning indifference, but her gaze kept darting toward the shadows that pooled in the cracks of the shutters. Inside, the smell of old ash mingled with mildew, thick and clinging, as if a fire had only recently been extinguished. The wooden floorboards groaned underfoot, the sound echoing unnaturally long for an empty room. On the right wall, a charred stain spread, gray-black, like a handprint pressed into the grain. A hallway stretched forward only to end abruptly against a blank wall, senseless, like a doorway that had been sealed shut. The wife froze, fingertips brushing the cold timber, feeling a hollow resonance from the other side. The window looked out toward the forest, but the view bent and warped like a fractured mirror. For a fleeting second, the dim reflection showed not the empty yard, but a long dining table, chairs gathered around it, an oil lamp flickering above a meal already set. When the wife blinked, only the thick canopy of mist-shrouded trees remained. That first night, the creaking never ceased, chairs and tables shifting in rooms that did not exist. Footsteps padded softly down the hallway, stopping just behind the sealed wall. The husband reassured himself. It was only the old house settling. Yet at times he felt cold breath grazing the back of his neck, though every window was shut tight. The wife lay still, listening to the faint clink of a spoon against glass echoing from nearby, a sound that rang once, then faded, leaving silence heavier than the dark itself. In the attic, dust lay thick, but small footprints pressed clear trails toward a corner where no exit existed. In a crumbling notebook found in a drawer, shaky handwriting scrawled a few desperate lines. The second house they never left. The page was torn, the ink blurred as though by tears. The house fell quiet again, but it was a silence damp, oppressive, swallowing every breath. And somewhere beyond the sealed wall, a faint sound stirred, the scrape of a chair being pulled out, ready for a guest who had just arrived. Nya. Morning crept in slowly, its pale light swallowed by the thick veil of mist, leaving only scattered beams filtering through the windows. The wife tidied the living room, her hands carefully moving each worn object. Beneath the dusty rug, the floorboards revealed deep scratches, long grooves as if chairs and tables had been dragged across the wood. The marks were so fresh that tiny splinters still clung to them, as though someone had moved the furniture just the night before. The daughter wandered down the hallway, her gaze settling on a round window. The glass was cloudy, yet when she stared into it, the reflection was not the familiar room behind her. Instead, she saw another space, a long dining table draped in white cloth, chairs neatly arranged, oil lamps glowing invitingly. Faint silhouettes gathered around, their heads tilted as though in conversation. She raised her hand to the glass, but the surface was icy cold, reflecting only her own uneasy eyes. When she stepped back, the vision vanished, leaving behind only the cracked pane and its gray dust. On the second night, as the house fell still, the strange sounds rose again. The clink of spoons against glasses, the scrape of chairs dragged over wood, the muffled hum of a feast that never ended. Footsteps crept along the hallway, stopping just behind the sealed wall. A soft knocking began, measured, patient, as if someone were trying to open the door long buried. In the bedroom, the husband gazed into the mirror, weary eyes fixed on his own reflection. But for an instant, he was no longer alone. Behind him, the dining table shimmered into view. Chairs filled, shadowy figures lifting their glasses. They had no faces, only blurred voids. A pale hand rested on his shoulder in the glass, but when he turned, the room was empty, the mirror reflecting only his solitary frame. The wife could not sleep. At midnight, she wandered the hallway. The floor bowed gently beneath her steps, creaking like a heavy breath. She froze when she saw that the end of the corridor seemed longer than before. A door had appeared there, black, without a handle. As she approached, the narrow crack revealed only a fathomless dark beyond. From inside came whispers, layered voices overlapping, calling someone's name. She shut her eyes, and when she opened them, the wall was solid again, unbroken, as if nothing had changed. The next morning, the daughter sat quietly with her sketchbook. On the page was a drawing of their house, but inside it brimmed with chairs, lamps, and faceless guests. Their eyes were blank hollows. She shaded the doorway heavily, scrawling 2 words across the bottom. "Come in." Later, the husband searched the basement for tools. The dim light spilled over rough stone walls, where the floor was stained with old blackened ash. Sifting through it, he found a half-burned slip of paper. The trembling handwriting read, "They are still waiting at the table." By the third night, the house itself shuddered like a creature stirring awake. The lights flickered, shadows stretching unnaturally, the hallway lengthening with each passing minute. Laughter echoed faintly, distant yet growing clearer, as though the feast beyond the wall was reaching its liveliest moment. And from the depths of the dark came a drawn-out sound, scraping through the silence, the slow drag of a chair being pulled out, waiting for a new place to be filled. Morning came, but the light was too weak to chase away the chill. Inside the house, the space itself seemed to have shifted, though no one had touched a thing. Small objects, a stool, an old picture frame, a forgotten book on the table, moved subtly from their places. At times, they returned facing the wrong way, as though someone had used them and then set them back, but not quite right. The wife stood frozen in the living room. She watched the curtains stir, though no breeze passed, and beyond the glass appeared again the shadow of a glowing room. Inside it, the long table was now heavy with food, empty glasses raised in a silent toast. The faces remained pale and blurred, yet their presence was sharpening, growing more defined. When night fell, the sounds no longer came in scattered fragments, but in a relentless chorus. Footsteps circled the hallway, doors slammed from beyond the sealed wall, breaths seeped from imagined cracks. When the wife stepped into the corridor, she found it stretching farther than before. No wall stopped her this time. At the far end stood a strange wooden door, slightly ajar. From within, a fathomless darkness exhaled cold air that wrapped around her. For a moment, she thought she saw a figure moving in the shadows, but when she blinked, it was gone. Only a flat, silent wall remained. The daughter sank deeper into restless dreams. In them, she sat inside the other house, the one bathed in light. Around her gathered faceless guests, laughing, pouring wine, striking spoons against glasses in a celebration that never ended. Beside her, a seat was always kept empty, waiting. Each time she hesitated, laughter echoed, urging her to sit. When she woke, the sound of clinking glasses still lingered in her ears. The husband, desperate for answers, pored over architectural sketches he had found in the town library. There, he saw what could no longer be denied. This house once had a twin built alongside it. Decades ago, a wildfire consumed the other, yet its foundation was never unearthed. The final note from the architect chilled him. The two cannot be separated. One gone, one remains. The remaining will forever seek the one it lost. When darkness descended again, the house trembled faintly, like the beat of a heart. Shadows stretched long, clinging to the floor, as if trying to climb upward. For a fleeting moment, the family felt it together. They were no longer the owners of this place. The house was expanding, plank by plank, wall by wall, making room for another presence to press in. And somewhere in that deepening dark, another chair scraped back, pulled out, waiting for the one who had just been chosen. Nenda, Namd. Night fell faster than usual. The last light of dusk was swallowed whole, leaving a dense darkness pressing in around the house. When the yellow ceiling lamp flickered on, it sputtered, its glow shivering as if being consumed by something unseen. The hallway now stretched unnaturally long, its damp, mottled walls carrying the weight of centuries. The wife pressed her face to the window pane, and this time it was no fleeting vision. Across the yard, the twin house stood clear, glowing bright as though in celebration. Its doors hung wide open, faceless silhouettes drifted in and out, glasses in hand, moving with an air of festivity. She saw the long table laden with food, steam curling upward, faint music drifting through the air, mingling with bursts of laughter. But when she blinked, it was gone. Only the motionless, black forest remained. The daughter could no longer resist the call of her dreams. At midnight, she vanished from her room. The wife, frantic, searched the house and froze at the sight before her. In what had always been an empty room, now stood the illuminated feast. Her daughter sat upright at the table, her eyes vacant, staring ahead. Around her, the faceless guests raised their glasses, tilting their heads in silent welcome. The wife stepped forward, but the air thickened like a veil, resisting her. She saw pale, bony hands settle on her daughter's shoulders, holding her gently, yet firmly, in place. Long white fingers tightened as the mother tried to press closer. The sound of the banquet swelled, echoing through the walls, laughter entwined with the clinking of spoons, a chorus welcoming their newest guest. The husband rushed in, desperate, reaching to pull his daughter back. But when his hands met her form, he felt only a frigid emptiness, slick as ice. Her body was fading, dissolving into another world. For a fleeting instant, he saw the second house in full, its wooden walls glowing, windows alight with fire, the banquet brimming with faceless revelers. Then it all blurred away, leaving only the dark, dust-choked room and a table draped in neglect. The wife collapsed to her knees, listening. From beyond the wall, the voices pressed harder, repeating their invitation in waves. Chairs scraped against the floor, many of them, as though the table were being set for more. The structure of their own home seemed to buckle, pushed aside, as another house forced itself into being within its walls. In that moment, the family understood. They were not merely living in an old cabin. They were sharing it with another house, still standing, still full, still expanding, until the feast that had never ended was finally complete. Nay, dawn never came. Time itself seemed suspended in endless night, broken only by the jaundiced glow of a single lamp casting light over the frigid room. The wife stirred awake, only to realize she was no longer in the old creaking bed. She sat at a brightly lit banquet table, surrounded by faceless guests. The air reeked of wine, roasted meat, and burning wood, but the scents only thickened the suffocating atmosphere. The blank heads turned toward her in unison, featureless yet heavy with the weight of hundreds of unseen eyes. Through the window of this new house, she saw the outline of the old one, the home they had moved into, now sunken in shadow, hollow, drained of life. Only one figure remained there. Her husband sat slumped in the dim room, his eyes locked on the wall. He could hear every laugh, every clink of raised glasses from the other side. Within the chorus of sound, his wife's and daughter's voices rang out, familiar yet estranged, calling his name in a haunting harmony. He pressed his palm against the cold wall, and from the other side, pale hands pressed back. Tin like ice, fingers long and bony, clawed at the seams of the wood, pulling, tugging, prying open a crack. Light from the banquet spilled through, flickering like a beckoning flame. The slow scrape of a chair echoed, deliberate, preparing for one final guest. The husband staggered back, trembling, but the house did not allow escape. The walls closed in, the hallway shortened. The ceiling sank lower, pressing the breath from his chest. The attic groaned, dust drifting down like glowing cinders in the dim light. All of it drove him back toward the widening fracture, where shadow and light shimmered together like a door ajar. Through the gap, he saw his wife and daughter seated side by side, their forms fading but recognizable. Their faces, however, were dissolving into pale voids, merging with the faceless beings gathered at the table. Though empty, they tilted their heads and raised their glasses in unison, offering an invitation impossible to resist. The laughter swelled, rising, shattering, drowning out the pounding of his heart. In his final moment, he laid his hand upon the crack. The door burst wide, golden light pouring through, swallowing the last remnants of darkness. The sound of a chair scraping out one final time groaned through the air, and then fell silent. The small wooden house in Vermont sank into utter stillness. Outside, the forest lay heavy with mist, unmoving, as though no one had ever lived there at all. But if one were to stand close at night, pressing an ear to the mildewed wall, they might still hear it. The clink of spoons against glasses, the scrape of chairs sliding back, and the endless banquet echoing from the twin house, where those who chose to sit down never rose again. Nah. In the desolate countryside of the Midwest, a weathered radio station stands abandoned by the roadside, left to rot after a fire 20 years ago. Yet every midnight, the airwaves around the town carry a voice, a low, hollow broadcaster's tone, cold as static. He warns listeners to lock their doors, then begins reading a list of names. Names belonging to those long dead. And anyone who dares to listen through the entire program before sunrise disappears without a trace, as if pulled straight into the invisible currents of the broadcast. Daniel Carter drove his old car through the low Midwestern hills, the empty highway stretching on as if without end. Once, he had been a well-regarded investigative journalist, but in recent years, his reputation had faded. Assignments grew scarce. His last article had been rejected by the paper, and now he knew he had only one chance left. A story haunting enough to make waves, or he would vanish into obscurity forever. Rumors about the haunted radio station drifted through online forums and in scraps of gossip from the locals. It broadcasts every night. If you listen until the end, you never wake up again. Part of Daniel suspected it was just another urban legend, but another part hoped, if the strange phenomenon was real, it would be the story of his career. "You mean the station?" The woman at the counter hesitated, eyes darting as though afraid someone might overhear. "Don't go near it. People have died because of it. Don't be foolish enough to listen." When Daniel pressed her, she only shook her head, slammed the ledger shut, and refused to speak further. That silence only drew him deeper. He rented a modest room on the town's edge, where the elderly innkeeper warned him with the same half-whisper, "When night falls, don't turn on the radio." But in Daniel's suitcase, an old shortwave receiver already waited. That night, a little past 11:30, Daniel sat at a rickety wooden desk, slowly turning the knobs. The static crackled like rainfall. 11:58. At the stroke of midnight, the dial at 96.3 suddenly came through, unnaturally clear. A man's voice filled the room, deep and measured, sounding as though it belonged to no particular era. "Good evening, listeners. Tonight, stay inside, lock your doors. Out there, something waits." Daniel shuddered. The tone did not waver. It carried the weight of command. Then, the broadcast shifted. The voice began to read names, each spoken slowly, like tolling church bells. Mary Collins, Joseph Hale, Thomas Reed. Daniel scribbled them quickly into his notebook, his heartbeat quickening. The list stretched on for nearly 10 minutes. But then came one name that froze him in place. Henry Alden, the very man he had met earlier that afternoon at the general store, the one who had quietly warned him, "Don't go near it." The program ended abruptly with a long burst of static. Then silence. Daniel sat unmoving for hours, eyes locked on the radio, ears still echoing with that strange voice. He told himself it was only a hoax, a trick transmission, some elaborate prank. But deep down, a chill rooted itself in his bones. He had brushed against something that was never meant to be touched. At 3 a.m., Daniel finally closed his notebook. Tomorrow morning, he would find Henry Alden. If the man was still alive, then all of this was nothing more than superstition. But if not, it would mean the legend had already stepped out of the shadows, and Daniel had heard a warning whispered from the other side of death. The next morning, Daniel went to the wooden house where Henry Alden lived. The door was shut tight, curtains drawn, no light escaping from within. He knocked, calling Henry's name. Silence. An elderly neighbor across the street stepped out and shook his head slowly. "Mr. Alden, he hasn't been seen since last night. The door's still locked, but he's gone." The words chilled Daniel's spine. The death list was no joke. It carried some kind of power, a hidden hand erasing people from existence. He went to the town's small library to dig deeper. Faded newspapers told the story of the 1983 fire that destroyed the Dagwakshi X radio station. Every staff member on the night shift had perished. None escaped. Locals whispered that their ashes had merged with the radio waves, becoming the very thing that still echoed at midnight. By late afternoon, Daniel passed the old general store again. The woman from the day before looked at him with a mix of pity and dread. "You listened, didn't you?" she whispered. "Don't turn it on again. Once it speaks your name, your soul belongs to it." Before Daniel could ask more, she turned away quickly, as though afraid someone or something was listening. That night, in his motel room, Daniel could not resist the temptation. He switched on the radio, tuning carefully to 96.3 DOI. The announcer's voice returned, clear and haunting. "Tonight, stay inside. Listen well." The list began again. This time, the names were more familiar. Daniel recognized at least 3 people from town he had seen that very day. Between the pauses, faint, overlapping whispers seeped through, like dozens of voices weeping within the static. And at the end, the broadcaster let out a drawn, guttural laugh that froze Daniel's blood. The program ended. Silence filled the room once more. But Daniel knew it was only the surface. Beneath it, something was moving, waiting for the next night to call more names. He closed his notebook, his palms slick with sweat. Yet instead of retreating, his reporter's instinct drove him further. He had to go to the abandoned radio station. Only there could Daniel hope to uncover the source of this nightmare. City, Ali. The road leading to the abandoned radio station was overgrown with weeds and pitted with potholes, as if the entire town had conspired to erase it from memory. The 2-story concrete building sagged under a gray sky, its windows shattered, its antenna bent like brittle bones. Daniel parked, drew a deep breath, and stepped inside. Dust coated everything. The hallways were dark, the walls scarred with burns. At the end of the corridor lay the recording booth, its wooden door half charred, but still intact. Daniel swept his flashlight across the room. The old microphone still stood on the desk, layered in dust, as though waiting for someone to return. Scattered tapes littered the floor, many warped and blackened by fire. He picked up one of the few intact reels and slid it into the machine. A burst of static screeched, then gave way to broken sounds. Frantic cries for help, muffled sobbing, and suddenly a rasping laugh. The very same laugh Daniel had heard over the midnight broadcast. A shiver ran down his spine. The sounds were not merely recordings. They seemed to bleed through the present, echoing out of the darkness itself. He stopped the machine quickly, but his ears still rang with that unnatural resonance. Turning, his flashlight caught the back wall. Scrawled there in charred black letters were the words, "Whoever listens becomes part of the signal. Whoever joins the signal never returns." The writing was shaky, desperate. Daniel left the booth, heart hammering. In the adjacent storage room, he found a stack of burned personnel files, a roster of the night shift staff from 1983. Every name matched those he had already heard in the broadcasts. There was no longer any doubt. The announcer's voice was the echo of the dead. Outside, Daniel gulped the damp air, trying to shake off the suffocating weight. Yet the shadows pressing against the building seemed thicker, heavier. In the wind, he thought he heard whispers, fragments of voices overlapping, as though a crowd of unseen souls was still trapped within the station's scorched concrete walls. Daniel knew he had gone too far. And the most terrifying thought was this: the broadcast might not stop at calling other names. One night soon it might call his. Oh. The third night in town, Daniel sat before the old radio, the red glow of the clock reading 11:59. He had promised himself he would never listen again, yet his trembling hand still reached for the dial. The radio seemed to have its own gravity, an open, black doorway he could not resist. 12:00 door. The static cleared. The announcer's familiar voice filled the room, cold and resolute. Good evening, listeners. Tonight, the souls are ready. The list began. Each name rang out, stretched long like a funeral bell. Daniel scribbled in his notebook, but halfway through, the pen slipped from his hand. The voice slowed, paused. The silence pressed down like ice. Daniel Carter. He froze. His heart hammered against his ribs, sweat pouring down his face. For the first time, the broadcast had spoken a living name. His name. The name of a man sitting right here, hearing every syllable of his fate. The room shifted. Shadows expanded and contracted like breathing lungs. In the small mirror on the wall, Daniel's reflection vanished, replaced by the charred, hollow-eyed face of the announcer from decades past. The man's lips moved in perfect sync with the voice spilling from the radio. You have listened. You belong to us. Daniel screamed, hurling the radio to the floor. But the sound did not stop. The broadcast bled from the outlets, from the wires in the walls, even from the hiss of wind outside the window. The whole town had become a single, enormous speaker, and every whisper carried the same name, Daniel Carter. He bolted into the night, sprinting across the empty road toward the abandoned station. If there was a way out, it had to be at the source. But the sky above burned crimson, the moon casting its pale, deathly glow across the rooftops. In that light, Daniel saw figures staggering into the street, faces he recognized from the lists. They were no longer alive, but echoes of flesh and bone, murmuring in unison. You will broadcast with us. Daniel pushed harder, lungs aflame, but deep inside he knew the truth. Once his name had been spoken on the airwaves, the door home was already closed. Decay. Daniel burst through the scorched wooden doors of the radio station. The recording booth was swallowed in darkness, dust thick in the air. But on the desk, the old microphone glowed faintly, as if it had just been switched on. The transmitter light blinked red, in rhythm with his own pounding heart. I don't belong to you, he shouted, his voice ragged. But the words immediately echoed back through the speakers, distorted, delayed, broadcast live. He heard himself laughing, a hoarse, broken sound that warped into the announcer's voice. Daniel lunged at the microphone, trying to rip it free, but his hand stuck fast to the frozen metal. A searing current tore through him. Memories ripped loose, childhood faces, fragments of love, every moment of his life, sucked into the invisible hum of the airwaves. Outside the window, the figures gathered. They shuffled closer, hollow-eyed, their mouths moving in unison. Daniel Carter broadcast with us. Their chant merged with the static of the radio, a grotesque chorus of the damned. He fought, but the more he struggled, the less of him remained. His body blurred, bones and blood dissolving into vibration, fading into the signal. Daniel screamed one final time, but the cry did not leave his lips. Instead, it rang clear through the radio on the floor. Then silence. The microphone's glow died. Daniel was gone. Only his notebook remained on the desk, its last page smeared with sweat and trembling words. "If you hear your name, run, never stay." That midnight, on frequency 96.3, the announcer's voice returned. But this time, between the roll call of the dead, another voice joined in. Newer, younger, trembling at first, then steady. It was Daniel, his voice now part of the eternal broadcast. "Good evening, listeners. Tonight, lock your doors and listen." Outside, the sun would rise as always. The town would endure, but anyone who tuned their radio to 96.3 at midnight would hear Daniel reading names that would never end. And the signal would never die. "Ha! Kelly!" In a forsaken graveyard of New England, no trees of wood take root. Instead, they rise from human bone, ribs twisting into skeletal branches, skulls swaying like pale, hollow fruit. Among them moves the gravekeeper, an ancient shadow, silently tending his garden of the damned. Each soul of the unfortunate, once sown, blossoms into another tree of bone, feeding the forest that should never have been. Nen Pasi. The fog of New England clung to the earth like a burial shroud, veiling the narrow path that wound up the hill where the old cemetery lay. Michael Hale, a man in his 40s, walked slowly, one hand gripping a weathered leather notebook. An archaeologist by trade, he had little patience for folklore. To him, this graveyard was nothing more than a forgotten relic of the 17th century. Before arriving, Michael had heard the villagers' strange warnings. They told him never to set foot on the hill after sunset. They whispered of pale figures gliding through the mist, of groans rising from beneath the earth, of trees that grew not from wood but from bone. He had laughed, dismissing their words as superstition woven from fear. But the suffocating silence here gnawed at his certainty. At the crest of the hill, Michael stopped before a gate of blackened iron, rusted and twisted. The carvings of crossed bones were nearly worn away. A stone tablet bore a fading Latin inscription, Hic silentis locantur. Here, the silent still speak. He pressed his hand against the gate, the chill bit like metal drawn straight from ice. Inside stretched a garden of the dead. Tombstones leaned and fractured, their inscriptions lost to moss. Weeds choked the soil, yet here and there, pale shapes jutted from the earth like limestone shards. Michael crouched and realized they were fragments of bone, disturbingly clean, as though placed there deliberately rather than left to decay beneath the soil. Michael opened his notebook and began to record everything. The shape of graves, the weathered symbols, even the position of the bones. Then came a creak, sharp, deliberate. Michael's head snapped up. Across the cemetery, near the largest tomb, stood a figure. The fading light sketched a gaunt old man with a hunched back, a long coat trailing the ground, and a rusted spade in his hand. He did not move, yet his sunken eyes seemed fixed on Michael from within the hollow dark of their sockets. Michael swallowed hard. He had not expected a caretaker. Relief should have come, but instead, a cold shiver clawed its way down his spine. The old man's body did not shift, yet the creak came again, like a gate closing of its own accord. Michael turned. The iron gate stood shut behind him, silent and immovable, as if it had never opened at all. Ah! Michael instinctively stepped back as the old man advanced. His black coat dragged across the wet grass, with a sound like bones grinding together. The hollows of his eyes were deep and sunken, his stare pressing against Michael's chest, as if trying to pierce straight through him. "Night has fallen," the man rasped, his voice corroded like rusted iron. "This place does not belong to the living." Michael forced himself to remain steady. He raised the worn leather notebook, his tone firm. "I'm an archaeologist. I'm here only to survey these old graves. I'll cause no trouble." A crooked smile bent the old man's face. "Survey?" he echoed, tapping the head of his spade against the ground 3 times. The sound reverberated hollow and strange, not the thud of solid earth, but the echo of a void beneath. This soil does not hold history. It feeds. A chill ran through Michael, but pride in his profession pushed him forward. "If you are the caretaker, then surely you understand the archaeological value of this place. Some of these stones date back to the 17th century, perhaps even earlier." The old man bowed his head, his trembling hand stroking the shaft of the spade. "My name is Elias. I have tended this ground longer than anyone remembers. Those stones tell you nothing. What truly lives here does not rest above the earth." The wind stirred, carrying a rustling like countless hands scratching beneath the soil. Michael froze, his heart hammering. Through the grass, he glimpsed pale shapes, finger bones, writhing upward, retreating just as quickly. He blinked, and they were gone. Only the grass swayed. Elias watched him still, his lips moving as though in prayer. "You should not remain past dark. After sunset, the soil hungers." Michael drew a sharp breath, etching the words into memory, though his rational mind refused surrender. "I need only 1 night of study. Tomorrow morning, if you wish, I'll be gone." Elias regarded him in silence, then let out a low, broken laugh that cracked like brittle bone. "1 night, more than enough for the earth to notice you." He turned and shuffled deeper among the graves, his shadow dissolving into the leaning stones. Michael thought to call after him, but his throat tightened, no sound emerging. The headstones around him seemed to lean closer, their shadows tangling together like skeletal arms reaching outward. By the time the last light drained from the sky, Michael stood alone, the leather notebook open in his shaking hands. In the suffocating dark, only the scratch of his pen on paper could be heard. Yet beneath the damp soil, another sound stirred, an endless rasping, as though hundreds of skeletons breathed in rhythm with him. Ah, noir. Night fell over New England as swiftly as if some unseen hand had snuffed out a vast lantern in the sky. The cemetery drowned beneath a heavy curtain of darkness, lit only by a pale crescent moon, its glow spilling across the crooked stones. Michael stood frozen, pen halted above the page. A strange silence pressed down. No insects, no owls, only the restless wind spiraling through ancient crypts. Then the sound returned. At first it was no more than the patter of pebbles, but it grew, grinding, splintering, the brittle crack of something breaking far beneath the soil. Michael staggered back, eyes locked on the grass at his feet. The earth swelled upward, as though something beneath clawed for release. A sharp snap split the night. From the ground, a shard of bone jutted skyward, pale and glistening under the moonlight. Another followed, curved like a branch. Horror clamped Michael's chest as he realized. Ribs. The branches bent and twisted, joints snapping into place, forming the grotesque outline of a tree clawing its way toward the sky. Not one, dozens. All around him, the earth quivered. Skulls burst from the grass like fruit. Hollow eyes turned toward him. The graveyard writhed, birthing bone trees that groaned as they rose, their skeletal limbs grinding together with a sickening chorus. Michael's breath caught as he stumbled back toward the largest tomb. In the weak moonlight, he saw what made it worse. Many of the trees still clung to tatters of clothing, shoelaces, scraps of fabric, even the glint of a wristwatch. These were not relics of centuries past. They were the remains of the missing. The wind howled, carrying with it a sound more dreadful than any gale. The broken murmur of countless voices. Michael strained to listen, heart pounding, and heard them. Help us! Release us! The earth devours. His legs trembled, but terror chained his eyes to the sight before him. The bone forest climbed higher, trunks weaving into a pale lattice, skulls dangling like rotten fruit, clacking against one another in the cold air. Some rose 10 feet high, their limbs creaking as though eager to embrace him. The cemetery had become a living garden of the damned. Michael turned to flee, but the ground at his back split open too, bone shoots sprouting and snapping shut around him. He was trapped, hemmed in by dozens of reaching trunks. A shudder cut down his spine as one tree nearby bent toward him. Its ribs groaned, splintering as they spread open like fingers ready to seize their prey. The air thickened with the stench of damp earth and the sickly sweetness of rotting flesh. Michael gagged, bile rising in his throat. With a strangled cry, he hurled himself toward the massive tomb at the cemetery's heart. Its stone door hung ajar beneath the moonlight, waiting. He didn't hesitate. He plunged inside and slammed the heavy slab shut behind him. Darkness swallowed him whole. The silence pressed so deep he could hear only the hammering of his own blood. And then, from the depths of the crypt, a whisper unfurled, long and serpentine. You have entered the garden. Michael stiffened, ice coursing through his veins. In that moment he understood. He was no longer an observer. He was part of the soil now. Me, I see. Inside the stone tomb, the darkness was thick as a drowned sea. Michael pressed his back against the heavy door, breath ragged, ears still echoing with the brittle crack of bones outside. The air was rank with mold and the faint iron tang of dried blood, choking his lungs until he thought he might suffocate. He flicked on his flashlight. Its trembling beam cut across damp stone walls slick with moss. But it was not only stone. The surface was carved over and over, a mad tapestry of names etched in desperate haste, hundreds of them, clawed in Latin, Old English, and symbols Michael had never seen before. They sprawled like curses left behind by those who vanished. At the tomb's far end stood an altar. Upon it lay a cracked ceramic vessel brimming with fragments of bone, pale and granular like salt. From the floor, black roots wormed upward, coiling around the remains, feeding on them. Michael staggered back, chilled with realization. The earth here did not merely devour, it cultivated. A rasping voice rose from the shadows behind him. You've seen it now. Michael spun, light quivering across Elias, the gravekeeper, stepping forth from the dark. He still clutched his rusted spade, his coat dragging low, but the beam revealed something worse. His skin was fissured with cracks, in places peeling back to expose the bone beneath. Beneath that wrinkled husk, Elias was little more than another living tree of bone. What are you? Michael stammered. Elias chuckled, the sound sharp as snapping ribs. I am only the sour. You saw the garden outside. The soil thirsts for souls. It devours the dead, but without a hand to tend them, they would wither. I feed them. I watch over them. Michael trembled, yet curiosity forced the words from him. And the missing? They are your trees as well. Elias inclined his head slowly. The wanderers, the sinners, even the curious, like you. Any who set foot upon this land become seed for the garden. That is the covenant. The earth grants me existence, and in return, I plant. Call me monster, if you will. I have only kept my vow. Michael backed away, heart pounding. I can't stay here. Elias advanced, his shadow stretching across the walls, carved with the names of the dead. You are already here. The gate behind you will never open again. The earth has recognized you, and it craves you for its next tree. The flashlight shook in Michael's grip, its beam catching Elias's face. His eyes were no longer eyes at all, only gaping hollows. From his mouth writhed slender bone roots, squirming like parasites. Elias raised the spade, its handle blackened, its blade glinting cold. I do not kill you, he whispered. I plant you. The ground beneath Michael split apart, jagged cracks yawning wide. Skeletal hands thrust up, clutching at his ankles. He screamed, struggling, but the grip only tightened, dragging him inch by inch toward the soil. In that frantic instant, clarity struck him. He had only two paths: surrender to the earth's hunger, or shatter this vile covenant, whatever price it demanded, even if it cost his own life. And Elias stood above him, smiling faintly, the way a farmer smiles as the seed finally sinks into the waiting ground. Ingen, umaya. Michael screamed, wrenching at his legs as skeletal hands clamped tighter, dragging him down. The pull tore his skin open, blood spilling into the soil, hungrily swallowed as if poured onto smoldering ash. Despair crushed his chest, suffocating every breath. No, I don't belong here. He clawed at the stone wall, desperate to resist the earth's hunger. Elias only watched, hollow eyes sinking deeper into shadow, his voice calm and resonant, like a litany whispered at the end of time. You belong to the garden the moment you set foot here. Your blood will enrich the soil. Your bones will bloom into new branches. Do not resist. Let the earth claim you. Michael's frantic gaze darted to the altar. The fractured clay urn lay there, brimming with bone dust, its surface tangled in writhing black roots that trembled like starving veins. A thought pierced his panic. If the garden's existence was bound to that vessel, breaking it might sever the pact. With the last of his strength, he lunged, clutching a jagged stone from the tomb wall. The skeletal hands gripped harder, pulling him waist-deep into the ground, but Michael roared, hurling the rock with all his fury at the urn. It shattered with a violent crack. Fragments flew, bone dust burst into the air like a pale storm. From beneath the earth rose a shriek, thousands of voices howling as one, an unholy choir of souls torn free. The skeletal hands around him convulsed, then loosened their grip. Elias's roar split the chamber, his voice breaking for the first time. You fool! You do not understand what you've done. The tomb quaked. The ceiling split, stones raining down. Michael scrambled free, dragging himself toward the sealed door. His hand pressed against the cold slab, then froze. His fingers were no longer flesh, but bare white bone, the skin shriveled and peeling away. He looked down in horror. His legs too were changing, skin splitting open, bones stretching outward like gnarled roots. The price of breaking the covenant was not freedom, but transformation. A seed, stronger, hungrier, was taking root. Elias writhed in the collapsing dark, yet laughter rasped from his withering throat. Did you think you escaped? No. You have only taken my place. Michael's scream curdled into the cracking of bone. His body bent and warped, limbs driving deep into the soil, veins hardening into root, joints twisting into branches. His mind dimmed, hollowed, until only the hunger remained, spreading, devouring, eternal. By dawn, the graveyard stood silent, cloaked in mist. The bone trees towered motionless, their pale branches gleaming like ivory. At the garden's heart rose a new trunk, its limbs stark white, and from them dangled a broken pen and a blood-stained notebook. The Garden of Bone had claimed another, and it would never cease to grow. Known